Very well, guys. We're going to continue now with the second part of the hammer right here, and we're ready to jump onto this like element right here. Now, before we do that, I want to show you about something called display layers. As you can see, we're getting into a point where modifying a couple of things here is it's getting a little bit complicated because we have a lot of elements, and by a lot I mean there's three elements right here, and I would like to hide them for a little while I work on other parts of the hammer. So there's two ways to hide things. First of all, if you select an object, any object, and you press the letter H, it's going to be hidden here on the outliner. As you can see, it's like grayed out, and that means that it's hidden. You can select it and press H again, and it's going to be visible again. However, imagine having like 200 different elements here in the outliner. It's going to be a little bit difficult to find all of them. So one thing I like to do is I like to select all of the elements right here. Let's first transformation, delete history, all the stuff to keep them clean. And if we go to this side right here, this is called the display layers. We can use this last button, which is called create a new layer and assign selected objects. And it will create a layer very similar to Photoshop or other softwares. And this layer is pretty much a visual container. So if we turn off this V, which is the visibility, it's going to be hidden. It's not going to be hidden here in the outliner, but we can very easily turn this on and off. And it's a way faster like approach to generating this sort of elements. Now, this box right here, as you can see, it's pretty much another cylinder, probably six-sided as well. So I'm going to start with a cylinder, bring this up right here, rotate this 90 degrees to either side, and I use the subdivision to bring this all the way to 6. Now, it seems to be like facing the proper way. Now it's just a matter of making sure that it has the proper element, or the proper length. So I'm going to press Control and click on this little green box so that I can move this on the Y-axis, and it should be uniform. Do not do this. This is a very common mistake when we're doing the right view. Oh, there we go. Very common mistake is people will do this to match the perspective. But if you do that, as you can see, we're going to get a really like elongated, weird effect. So we actually want to press Control and click on this so that we're doing X and C at the same time. Remember when we talked about these constraints on the viewport chapter? Well, we're going to do that. So we're going to go right view, Control, and click on the green one. And there we go. So that way we're expanding this on the X and the Z at the same time, and we give a uniform effect. That's it. That's pretty much all we need for this one. The next thing is, of course, the bevel. So I'm going to go to Edge Mode, select all of the edges, get rid of soft selection. We don't need it anymore. And with Control, I'm going to deselect the edges on the center because we only want this ones on the sides. We bevel. And if we open the little box here, we're going to go with a small fraction and 2 segments. A little bit more. There we go. I kind of want to keep it a little bit stylized. There we go. So that's it. Now we can bring this back on, and here's where we're going to start seeing some slight issues. Here's where overlap might not be the best idea, because as you can see, we need to increase this size a little bit more. There we go. But overlap's looking a little bit weird on the bottom part. What can we do? Well, if we are allowed to do it on the concept piece, or if we talk to our client or to our director, we might just be able to go to all of this lower vertex and just like extrude them a little bit to the side or scale them a little bit to the side so we get enough room for the whole thing. This is no longer a perfect cylinder because the base is a little bit wider, but it shouldn't be affecting anything of the elements that we have right here. Let's go to the right view again. We're going to create a new cylinder for the other part of the handle, which is this one right here. And we're going to rotate 90 degrees and rotate 90 degrees. There we go. Position it right around there, and we can scale it to create the handle for the hammer. I think I'm going to lower it just a little bit so it has a little bit more, so it's a little bit more centered. If we want to center it perfectly to this point right here, we can press the V key, the V as in vacuum. And if we press that one, we are going to turn on something called snap to point. And when we do that and we use any of the arrows, we can actually snap it to the same like distance that any of these points have. So for instance, in this case, I think snapping it to the center of this body of the hammer is the best idea. Once we have that, we need to analyze the next parts, which are going to be a little bit tricky. Now, as you can see, this part right here and this part right here are very similar. They're very similar because they share a very similar structure, even though the length of these elements is slightly different. So one thing we could do is we could do one of this and then mirror it to the other side of the element and just modify the mirror element, because as you can see, the curvature here and here, like all of these elements are very, very similar. Now, we have a little bit of a challenge here because this stone is also a sort of like six-sided stone, but then it goes into this like very cylindrical looking shape. So how we would do this? Well, as with anything, the best idea is to start as simple as possible. So I'm going to create a cylinder here. I'm going to move the cylinder up. Again, with the letter V, I can snap it so it's right there on the center. There we go. And we're going to rotate this 90 degrees. Then we're going to go to the subdivisions, bring this down to 6. Perfect. Make sure that we have, yeah, that's great. And we're going to start scaling this up. Let's go to the right view. Of course, it's going to be a lot smaller. I can imagine that this is, like this part right here is where this rock ends. And again, using control, I can click this little green element and make this so that it matches or we get as close to the size as possible. So something like that. So that's going to be one side or one part of the head of the hammer, which is looking quite nice. I like this one quite a bit. You can see that on the front, there's a little bit of like a bevel and stuff. We'll take care of that in just a second. But since we know that this next part right here is actually coming from the same shape as the rock, a good idea to do here is I'm going to call this rock hammer front. I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to call this rock hammer front armor, so that we can use the exact same shape to generate this element right here. So I'm going to select both elements. I'm going to select the rock hammer front and the image plane right here. I'm going to isolate select so we can work on this, guys. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this vertex back so that we're right there. Okay? That's where we're going to stop pretty much. Now, we know that this piece right here is symmetrical, which means that if we could manage to create, in this case, like 1/4 of this element, like this section right here, we could mirror it to the other sides and get the exact same shape on the other side. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to delete all of the faces, except for these two faces right here. And then this face right here, I want to create a division right in the center. So I'm going to go Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop, and in the Insert Edge Loops, I'm going to use multiple and just one. And there we go. So now if we delete that face right here, I know that this is 1/4 of the element. If we mirror this to the other side and then the whole thing that we get, we mirror it down, we're going to have the full shape. And why is this important? Because with less parts of the element to worry about, we should be able to generate something that's a little bit cleaner or closer to this. So as you can see, what I'm looking for here is this sort of like cut, right? So I need to remove a face from this area. I'm going to be using this tool, which is called the multi-cut tool. It's a really handy tool because it has multiple elements or multiple tools inside of it. So if I press Control, for instance, I'm going to be able to insert an edge loop, very similar to the Insert Edge Loop tool, and I can modify and place this where I want. So I'm going to press Control on the top here, and I'm going to insert one right there. And then I'm going to press Control here, and I'm going to insert one right here. And what I'm going to do, as you might imagine, is I'm going to delete this one right here. So now, as you can see, we got this new shape, which is very close to the shape that we're going for right here. And this is the shape that we're eventually going to be mirroring to the other side. Now, on the top here, I would imagine that we're going to have a similar cut as what we have right here. So even though we don't see it, I'm going to add one line right there, and I'm going to delete this face as well. So we get this little shape right here. Now that we have the shape, we can actually start doing the mirror to create the whole like thing that's going to go around our rock element. Now, how does the mirror work? Mirror is one of the most powerful tools we have here inside of Maya, and we need to understand all of the things that we can do with it. So we start by selecting an object, and as you can see, the object has its pivot point, or its original pivot point coming from the cylinder. It's all the way up here. So I'm going to actually center the pivot point to show this example a bit clearer. Let's actually do like delete history and everything. This is the piece that we have, and it's completely clean. If we go to Mesh and we go to Mirror, you're going to see that the mirror option has a lot of functions. By default, the function is set to world -x, which means that whatever we model on the positive side of the world, remember the world is down here, will be mirrored to the other side. So actually, let me like reset the settings. There we go. So if I just do apply, you can see that we get something that's really close to what we want, but we actually lost some stuff over here that I don't like. So if you remember the original shape, we have a hole here, and if we do apply, we lose that hole, and that's not what we want. So the world function, again, as the name implies, will take the world coordinates, which in this case is this is the front camera. In this case, this is the line that we have right here, and it will mirror it from that point. However, as you can see on the merge threshold down here, it has this option called automatic, which is trying to merge the vertices that are really close to the center. And it's finding that these ones right here are really close to the center, and that's why it's merging them, which is not what we want. So I'm going to make sure to select costume. And as you can see, 0.001 is the default number. It should be more than enough. So if I do apply now, you can see that this now does work the way I intended it to work, which is really, really cool. However, if I wanted to do now on the y-axis, right, on the bottom part, it's not just about changing y and saying apply, because it is going to work, but it's going to be all the way over here. Why? Because this is using, again, the y-axis of the world, of the origin, as its point of mirror, and that's not what we want. So we can change which axis position we're using from world to something like object. Object will use the pivot point. So in this case, it's this one right here. If I do object and I hit apply, as you can see, we get the shape, which is a cool shape, but it's not the shape we're looking for. And the reason why this shape is not going to be working is because the pivot point of the object is not where we want it to be. And we can't really solve this by centering the pivot, because if we do that, we're still going to get this sort of like weird shape right here. So the only way we could fix it by using the pivot point would be to move this pivot point to the border of this guy's right here. To move a pivot point, you can press the letter D, and then with letter V, remember, we can snap this pivot point down here. So now the pivot point is down there, and if we do object y negative, we should get the shape that we're going for, which is this one right here. Okay, now it is a little bit tricky, and maybe we don't want to move the pivot point. Maybe we do like where the pivot point is. If that's the case, then fine. The other option we can use is a bounding box. A bounding box is an invisible box that every single object has inside of Maya, and the bounding box tells us what is the lowest point or component on this imaginary box. So again, you can imagine that there's like a box right here. Hey, oh, because I'm isolated. So you can imagine there's a box right here, and the lowest point of that thing right there, that's the lowest point of our bounding box, okay? So bounding box works really well in this case if I don't want to modify the pivot point, because I just say, okay, from the bounding box, from the lowest y point, do the mirror at that point. And we'll just hit apply, and there we go. We get the little armor piece that we're looking for. And that's it. So now, as you can see, we got this very nice armor piece like holding the whole element. However, we're still missing this sort of like element right here, or the cover that goes towards the cylinder. So I'm going to select the armor piece, isolate again, double click this edge, whole edge right here, and say Control E to extrude, and I'm going to use an offset and a thickness. As you can see, this is going to start like clamping things down. But as you can see, the what's the word? The extrusion, or not extrusion, no, it is extrusion, sorry. The extrusion can generate some weird effects right here when things are being pushed too much. So here's another way to do it. We use the extrude, we push with offset out a little bit, and then we change to R to go into scale mode, and we scale this down. And see how this becomes a more uniform like scale for the whole thing? That's what we're going for. This is the sort of effect that we wanna have. Of course, we're gonna go to the right view. We're gonna find the position, which is this one right here, and this is where we're gonna be having our element. We're not gonna go over this like cut right here. It looks a little bit weird. One thing we could do if we wanna imitate that a little bit more would be to just grab like this edge right here and this edge right here and just like push it slightly forward. It's not gonna really like make that much of a difference, and I think this looks a little bit more clean for like a dwarven hammer. So we're gonna go for this. One thing I do want to do is this whole thing, I want to push it really, really close to the wood. So something like that, so that it really looks like it's holding the whole element. Finally, I need to grab this guy right here. I need to Control E to extrude this and give it a little bit of thickness, right? So something like this. And there we go. So now it looks like we have this armor holding the whole rock. Now, the problem with this armor, because we're doing the subdivision method for everything, is that if we press number 3, we lose a lot of the cool shapes that we have. So we do need to add either a couple of bevels, or we can add some support edges. If you have a clean edge, such as this one, this one, this one, and even this one on the inside, bevels are usually a good idea, because we could just bevel, do 2 segments in a small fraction, and that's it. It's going to give us a nice, like, clean, hard surface. However, for other elements, such as this whole border right here, it will take a little bit of time to just select everything, and it's just time consuming. So for this one, I'm going to be using the cut tool, Control, and just insert one edge loop right there, and one edge loop right there. And as you can see, that's going to give us a nicer like thickness for the whole armor. Now, to really give this armor the effect that we want, I'm going to grab the corners. This corner, this corner, this corner, this corner, this corner, and this corner. The 6 corners of our element. We're going to grab all of them. We're going to bevel them as well. 2 segments and a small fraction. And as you can see, that's making this whole thing look a lot nicer, a lot cleaner. Now, if we want these things to be sharper, because as you can see, we were getting this sort of effect, we can add some support edges. But I don't want to add a support edge right here because it's going to affect everything on the inside. I just want to add a support edge right here. But the big question is, how can we add an edge right here and make sure that all of the edges that we add on all of the other ones are the exact same thing? Well, we delete history, freeze transformation, do all that stuff, we can actually activate something called symmetry. We can activate symmetry inside of Maya. I don't work with this as much like normally because it can be a little bit tricky with more complex shapes, but in this case, it should work just fine. So I'm going to turn this on to world X. That means that whatever I do on one side of the object on the world, it will be on the other side of the object as well. So as you can see, I can very easily insert an edge loop right there with control and another edge loop right there. And both the top and the bottom ones are going to be the exact same thing on both sides. So now if I press number 3, we get this. And even that like round effect that we're getting there, I think that looks pretty cool. It gives a sort of like organic and mechanic sort of like look that I think it's gonna benefit the whole piece. But if we wanted to eliminate that, it is possible to do so. We just need to do the exact same thing here. Add one line right there. As you can see, that becomes a lot like harder. However, as I mentioned, I think I'm gonna keep it. I think it makes it look way nicer. Now, for this piece right here, which is the last thing we're gonna do, and then we'll jump onto the other rock. For this piece right here, I am gonna grab all of the faces here. Let's turn off symmetry. I'm gonna just do a Control E, a little bit of an offset, and push this forward, just to give it sort of like an edge, right? And now that I have this, since this is a very simple shape, I'm just gonna bevel everything. I'm just gonna clean the object in bevel, 2 segments in a small fraction, and that's gonna give me a really like nice hard surface here for the rock. And there we go. Look at this. Not bad, right? We got this very nice armor piece, like holding the whole hammer together, and we got this this piece over here. Now, I know some of you might be wondering about the lines on this inner piece. It's probably just like a leather like thing. We could, of course, do a very similar approach to this one, but since it's quite hidden by the rocks and stuff, I don't think it's really necessary to do it. Okay. So now, before we finish this one, I want to do a quick mirror to get this shape right here because we already have it. This thing is exactly the same as this thing. The only thing that changes is the proportion, right? So I'm going to grab both objects, shift, right click, and instead of going to the menus, there's a shortcut here for mirror, option box. I'm going to change. I'm going to say, hey, I want to mirror these 2 objects on the world, but I want to mirror them on the C negative axis because so far we've been working on the positive side of C. So I want to go to the C negative axis over here, okay? Which hit apply. Now, before I do that, I'm just noticing something here. When I press number 3 here, there's a weird pinch over here. It seems like I messed up something. Because the curvature there looks a little bit weird. It should look clean like this. It's really weird. Let me analyze here this real quick. Because you can see here on the inside, when we press number 3, everything looks smooth. But on the outside, this edge right here looks a little bit weird. And I'm not sure why. Well, maybe it's fine. Kind of looks like an extra vertex, but I don't see it. We can try to fix it by deleting these faces right here. And then if we go edge, we can select one and the other and use this tool called bridge. One and the other and bridge. There we go. Yeah, so let's fix this again. So if you have this, just delete those faces and just select one of the edges, the other one, and just bridge. One and the other one, and just bridge. And that should fix any issues. Okay, so now that we have that, we can mirror this to the other side, to the C axis, as I mentioned. And there we go. Now, the only bad thing about mirroring, or not bad, but the thing about mirroring is it actually merges the elements into a single object. You can separate them by going mesh and then separate. And now each one of this is going to be its own separate mesh. And we actually do need to do that because as you can see, the proportions on this side are not exactly the same. So this one, I'm going to send to a pivot point. It's going to be a bit closer to this area right here. and all of the little legs right here get a little bit bigger. So let's push this forward a little bit. And then this one's quite a bit over here. And then the rock is very, very similar. We're going to center the pivot point, push it here, grab all of this vertex right here, and push it a lot more. Not a lot, but you can see like this is the distance right there. So I would say something like this is more than enough. And there we go. With this done, as you can see, we get a really, really cool looking hammer. We can grab all of the pieces right here, center pivot, delete history, freeze transformations to make sure all of the pieces are clean. And before we finish this hammer, we're actually going to go through all of the elements and rename them properly. But yeah, so far this looks really, really good. We're going to go one more video. I want to show you how to do those little like bolts or details that we have right there. We're going to use the mirror tool again. And I also want to show you how we can work or improve upon the concept to create something that looks even better. So yeah, hang on tight and I'll see you back on the next one.